empire over which the sun perpetually remains aloft, the sun is revered as the most cherished state by those with immense wealth, and a nation where the act of affixing a postage stamp in an inverted position is deemed an act of high treason. The United Kingdom stands as one of the most magnificent and influential nations throughout the annals of history. The vast expanse and venerable age of British history, interwoven with countless pivotal decisions that have shaped humanity, render the history of Britain a veritable fortress of legends and myths, which we are poised to dismantle over the course of the next few minutes, commencing with what is arguably the most celebrated event, the War of United States Independence. The year 1775 is ubiquitously portrayed in literature as a narrative where the nascent states, in a concerted effort, sought independence from their former colonial overseer. It is likely that you have encountered references to the Loyal Leafs, and you may have surmised that the situation was not as straightforward as it seemed. However, the truth is even more fascinating, because the reality is that the advocates for United States independence never secured a majority of the votes at either the elite or grassroots level. In recent times, a number of earnest scholarly works on the subject have emerged, revealing that the Loyalists, that is, the inhabitants of the 13 insurgent states who wished to remain a part of Britain, constituted 20% of the population, approximately 400,000 individuals. Conversely, the Patriots, those who championed independence, represented 40% or 800,000 people. This begs the question, where were the other 40%? These were the so-called pacifists who were disdained by both factions and merely requested to be left in peace, preferring to continue living under the British Empire. Thus, those who genuinely supported the independence movements constituted less than half of the populace. Even the very catalysts for the conflict are often presented to the contemporary observer in a negative light with respect to the British Empire. Issues such as taxation, the absence of self-governance, and other fiscal concerns paint a picture of a malevolent Britain whose avarice ultimately exhausted the forbearance of freedom-loving Americans. In a video addressing myths about the United States, we briefly touched upon this narrative. Here we will delve deeper, starting with the 7 Years' War. More precisely, the conflict with the French and Indians, as it is referred to in United States history, represents the North American theater of the broader conflict. As the name suggests, Britain found itself in opposition to France over territories in the New World, and emerged victorious by annexing Florida, regions east of the Mississippi River, and additional territories, effectively acquiring the entire landmass of New France. However, as one might expect, war is an exorbitantly costly affair. To put it succinctly, the situation that unfolded after the 7-Year War cast the relationship between Britain and its colony in a novel light, which can be encapsulated in the following hypothetical exchange. Good day, future United States of America. We have expended considerable funds and resources to shield the states from France during the 7 Years' War. I am uncertain of your implication. Allow me to clarify. Britain has invested heavily in annexing new territories. We are grateful, but now our coffers are depleted once more. I fail to grasp your point. Well, it would be most beneficial if you could contribute some financial support. How outrageous! We are discussing a war. This rendition is admittedly oversimplified and glosses over the complexities, but it is true that Britain invested a significant amount of money in expanding its overseas colonies and safeguarding them from rivals. The various taxes and duties that eventually led to the United States War of Independence were, in large part, an attempt to recoup some of these costs. And the figures demanded by Britain from the modern perspective were not astronomically high. The infamous tea tax that sparked the Boston Tea Party, for instance, amounted to approximately 20 to a maximum of 25%. To put this in contemporary terms, every resident of a country like Hungary currently pays a value-added tax, VAT, of 27% on not just tea, but all products and services. When one hears about the onerous taxes that have historically provoked wars, it is worth noting with a wry smile. More specifically, the Boston Tea Party was precipitated not by an increase in tea prices, but rather a decrease, and the tax disputes that led to the War for Independence had been simmering for decades. Our point is that Britain was not the unequivocal antagonist in the conflict with the United States. They were two typical Anglo-Saxon states of their era, each with their respective merits and shortcomings. But hold on a moment, the very term Anglo-Saxon is itself a two-layered myth. Many have heard it, and it has been employed by figures such as United States President Teddy Roosevelt, who, during the invasion of Cuba in 1898, brought along a copy of a book on Anglo-Saxon supremacy, or Winston Churchill, who in 1943 questioned their purported dominance over other races. The first layer of the phrase's mythos is its deeply racist past. The second, more ludicrous aspect is the association of Anglo-Saxon with the indigenous imperial inhabitants of Misty Albion. In actuality, prior to the year 1066, Europeans had a different understanding. The Saxon tribe resided in both Germany and England, and Latin authors created the term Anglo-Saxon to distinguish them. The first time the phrase appeared as Anglo-Saxon was in Latin and did not convey any significance beyond a geographical distinction of the Saxons based on their abode. Neither the rulers nor the inhabitants of Britain ever referred to themselves as such. In official documents, the title ruler of the Anglo-Saxons was sometimes used for the sake of clarity for Europeans between 410 and 1066 AD. The term Anglo-Saxon is cited in literature merely 3 times, all within the 10th century, while mentions of terms like Lisk or Angel Ching are abundant. In case it was not apparent, people simply called themselves English, and that was that. The notion of Anglo-Saxon Britain persisted until the Norman conquest by the Normans in 1066. Subsequently, it was appropriated by racial theorists who wished to celebrate their diverse ancestral heritage. The question that should have been posed, but was neglected, concerns the various nations that, like Czechoslovakia, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, Bahrain, Nepal, Oman, and others, were overlooked in 1940. At that time, the myth emerged that following the fall of France, Britain stood alone against Hitler. Even in scholarly texts, one might encounter titles claiming that the battle for Britain decided the Second World War and similar sentiments. The citizens of the aforementioned countries would likely take issue with such assertions, as all of them were officially at war with Germany in 1940. For instance, the HMS Achilles from New Zealand played a pivotal role in sinking the German battleship Graf Spee during the Battle of the River Plate, and no fewer than 4 Czechoslovakian squadrons participated in the Battle of Britain. Officially, Poles were responsible for 12% of the victories in the Battle of Britain, including the 303 Squadron from Poland, which boasts the highest kill-to-loss ratio, with Poles downing 2.8 German aircraft for every one they lost. Meanwhile, Iranian territory, by agreement with the USSR, was occupied by Indian troops. It seems rather incongruous to label a colonial power, whose empire was the largest in history, as lonely when the vast majority of its colonies only gained independence after the Second World War. All these territories supported Britain during the conflict, as did the United States, which the Lend-Lease Act was specifically designed to aid, with Britain receiving 2/3 of the allocated funds. This brings us to perhaps the most pervasive myth associated with British history, the notion that the empire ruthlessly extracted wealth from its colonies, leaving them in ruins. The widespread detestation of colonialism is predicated on this belief. However, there is one minor complication. The vast majority of the colonies were not profitable. Or to be more precise, they were profitable, but not through the extraction of resources as commonly believed. We have already examined the most salient example, the United States of America, which required significant British investment for defense and engaged in numerous wars with France, Spain, and others, all while being initially funded by the British Treasury. In return, Britain was met with tax resistance and ultimately an independent nation. This pattern was eventually replicated by other colonies. This led to a misconception regarding the immense profitability of colonies. In reality, 3/4 of British possessions were deeply unprofitable, including the South African diamond mines for much of their history. Before a diamond can be extracted, one must first invest in equipment, construct ports, roads, and other infrastructure, and then maintain it all with military and naval forces. Moreover, these resources were often exploited by private entities, meaning that the treasury received only a fraction of the profits through taxation. As a result, Britain found itself subsidizing private organizations that established diamond mines in theoretical Africa. The business owners grew wealthy, but the treasury saw only a small return on its investment. This topic has been thoroughly analyzed in numerous authoritative academic works, references to which can be found in the description. The true wealth that Britain derived from its colonies lay in the intangible realm of control over strategic sea passages, the ability to rapidly deploy military forces anywhere on the globe, and the world's most formidable navy capable of enforcing peace. These were the real benefits of the colonies, which enabled Britain to reap substantial profits, as evidenced in the Opium Wars against China in the 19th century. These conflicts brought Britain more money than any colony could have ever imagined, all while China remained nominally independent. The precarious financial state of the British Empire, which despite its vast resources teetered on the brink of bankruptcy during the First World War, was only salvaged by American financial support. In the years that followed, the British currency was virtually eradicated from global markets. If the colonies had been as lucrative as commonly portrayed, such a scenario would have been unlikely. Nonetheless, this does not negate the atrocities and suffering inflicted upon the local populations of the British Empire's colonies, a topic that merits its own discussion. In conclusion, virtually every nation, from ancient Greece to Paraguay, would have eagerly seized the opportunity to possess everything under the British Empire's dominion. The primary accusation against the British is that they succeeded where others, like Belgium, Germany, and the United States, were also engaged in similar practices. The British Empire simply had a more effective policy at the time. That concludes our discussion for now. I invite you to propose your own topics for future videos in the comments, and I look forward to our next encounter, dear friends.